Welcome to the Bronte Interpretive Centre. My name is Jason Diamond and I work for Armagh City, Banbridge, Craigavon Borough Council, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of the Bronte Centre and various sites associated with Patrick Bronte, who taught here from 1802 to 1806, father of the famous Bronte sisters. And just behind me here you can see a lovely mural done by an artist called Maeve King, depicting two of the most famous characters in the entire history of English literature, and that's Cathy and Heathcliff from the book Wuthering Heights by Patrick's daughter Emily, probably the most famous of the Bronte sisters books. Now, if you want to follow me, we're going to go into the schoolhouse and I'll show you a little bit and talk a little bit about Patrick Bronte in there, and afterwards we'll go and we'll visit a few sites associated with Patrick Bronte and his famous family. So we're now standing in the Drumballaroni schoolhouse, which Patrick taught in from 1802 until 1806, a period of 4 years. Drumballaroni gets its name from the Irish, drum for the hill or the ridge of, Bally is the townland of, and the Rooney comes from the O'Rooney family, who were bards to the McGuinness clan who ruled this area, and the O'Rooneys are allegedly buried in the very old graveyard attached to this church. A lot of people wonder, what on earth has Patrick Bronte got to do with this schoolhouse or this area? The reason is that not far from here, in a little place called Emdale, he was born in a one-room stone cottage, and his date of birth was the 17th of March 1777, and he was named after our patron saint, St Patrick, and he was also named after his maternal grandfather, Patrick McClory. But the birthplace cottage, or otherwise known as the Bronte Memorial, is very important in the history of the Bronte family, because it was from these humble origins that Patrick, the father of the famous Charlotte, Emily and Anne, was born. The cottage here, as you can see, really brings home how humble his origins were, and to go from this little cottage to Cambridge University, and to become the father of not just one, but three famous literary daughters in the entire history of English literature, is no mean feat. And it really drives home how humble his origins were and how talented Patrick was. And in fact, Patrick was the first Bronte to actually have a literary work published, when he had a collection of poems called the Cottage Poems published. He came here in 1802, taught for 4 years, still a few original features. You can see behind me the granite fireplace. There would have been a similar one at the far end of the schoolhouse, and it would have had a mud floor, and the pupils would have been segregated into boys and girls, and the older pupils would have helped teach the younger ones, which was part of the reason when we talked about Patrick having to leave Glasgow School. He was only a couple of years older than Hill and Todd, so he was an older pupil helping teach one of the younger ones. He came here in 1802, and afterwards, under the influence of Thomas Tighe, he enrolled in Cambridge University, and he enrolled in Tighe's old college, St John's College at Cambridge, St John's College, Cambridge. And this is where the name begins to change. Originally, the family were Bronte, B-R-U-N-T-Y, and it stayed that way until Patrick enrolled at Cambridge. You can go to the original register in Cambridge and you can see where they have written Bronte, B-R-N-T-Y. And if you imagine, Patrick was coming from a very humble background. He had a Northern Irish accent, and when the registrar obviously asked him his name, he said Patrick Bronte, and that's the way it was put down in the register. When Patrick graduated later, he had changed the name to Bronte, B-R-O-N-T-E, with the German umlaut, the 2 dots above the E. And he came back here to Northern Ireland for 5 weeks, stayed with his family, and he preached his very first sermon after graduating in the church, which we will go and we'll have a look at. So we're now standing in the old Drumballaroni parish church, and it was to this very church that Patrick came after he graduated from Cambridge University, and he came back home for 5 weeks to stay with family. And it was here to family and friends, the boy that was born the 17th of March 1777 in that humble little cottage stood up and preached a sermon here, and amongst the congregation was his old mentor, the Reverend Thomas Tye. And as we look around the church, which is pretty much as Patrick would have known it, we now have lovely pictures, lovely paintings that were commissioned from the Irish artist Rita Duffy, depicting the early life of Hugh and Alice, Patrick's parents, and of Patrick himself. So I hope you've enjoyed this little insight into the early life of Patrick Bronte, father of the famous siblings Charlotte, Emily and Anne. And again, I hope it highlights that without Patrick Bronte, there would have been no Charlotte Bronte, there would have been no Emily, and there would have been no Anne, and there would have been no Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre. Thank you very much.